Almost certainly more than 200,000 people when you consider the non-trauma excess deaths. That's 2% of the population. I'd also like to thank NECAP for persuading my Irish wife to shout at me, "Get the Brits out," earlier. I'm going to tell you about some people I've met in Gaza. I've got a photograph at home of a young Gazan doctor called Dr. Maysara Al-Rais. He was a medical student who I taught in Gaza in 2017. He got a scholarship to get out to work a bit in London, and he went back to Gaza. He spent time with us in our home, and the photograph is of him sitting in our kitchen, eating with my family and enjoying himself. He was killed on November the 7th last year. He was killed by an Israeli bomb. He was in his house with his parents and his sisters, and an Israeli jet bombed the house, killing all of them. His two brothers happened to be out of the house at the time, and they spent the next 48 hours searching through the rubble, looking for the bodies of their relatives. 2 days later, after 48 hours of non-stop searching, another Israeli jet bombed them and killed them. When I was last in Gaza a few months ago, I met Khaled, who was Maysara's best friend. Khaled works for Medical Aid for Palestinians in Gaza, and one of those heroic people who look after people like me when we go in to provide humanitarian aid. And Khaled told me about his last conversation with Maysara a week before he was killed. Maysara said to Khaled that he wasn't frightened about dying, and indeed he expected to be killed by the Israeli military. And this is something I hear time and again from Gazans. They expect to be killed. But Maysara said what frightened him more than anything was being bombed and being left buried under the rubble and being denied a proper burial. 13 months later, Maysara is still buried under the rubble and has still been denied a proper burial. And there are, of course, many thousands of Maysara left buried there. So I've been going to Gaza since 2010 to teach and to carry out surgery there, and I thought I'd be ready when I went out there for my first trip after October the 7th. I've been twice now. When I went there last December, I thought I was going to be prepared, but I wasn't remotely prepared. I saw things that I would never have dreamt of seeing in a civilized world, in a healthcare setting. And I'm going to tell you about a typical day that I experienced in the hospital, in Al-Aqsa Hospital, a small hospital in middle Gaza in Deir al-Balah. It's not used to trauma, but they were having mass casualties coming in every day. And one day I walked into the emergency department, having been operating, and it was chaos. There were dead bodies lying outside, dozens upon dozens of critically injured patients lying on the floor. And the first thing I saw was a little boy lying on the ground. We found out his name was Allah. And he was abandoned. His parents had been killed. No one had seen him. He was lying there, dying in front of us. And the first thing I noticed was a hole in the right side of his chest. With air being sucked in, his lung collapsed, and he was very near death. We took him into the resuscitation room and resuscitated him, and next to him was his sister, Aya, an 8-year-old girl who didn't have fatal injuries, but she had a badly fractured leg, and that leg was displaced and it needed to be straightened to make sure the blood could still get down to her foot. Now this was a day in Al-Aqsa Hospital where we'd run out of all painkillers. There were no painkillers to give this girl, and she had to have her leg straightened without any pain relief at all. And I can still hear at night, I can still hear her screams as that was done. 2 hours later, there was another massive casualties came in from another bombing of Nusrat camp. You'll know that name. And a girl came in of 8 years of age who was burnt so badly that you could see her facial bones through the burnt flesh. She was never going to survive. She wouldn't have survived in London. She wouldn't have survived anywhere in the world. And she certainly wasn't going to survive in Gaza. And all we could do, all we could hope to do, was give her pain relief to try and let her die peacefully. But of course, we had no painkillers. And we had nowhere private for her to die. So she lay on the floor. She lay on the floor of the emergency room waiting area, dying an excruciatingly painful death. And that was a standard day. We saw that every single day. There have been more children killed in Gaza in the last 13 months than in all the conflicts of the world in the last 5 years. There have been an average of 45 children killed every single day, on average, since October the 7th. In the other war going on in the world at the moment, in the Ukraine war, that figure is 0.7. So in Ukraine, 0.7 children killed per day. In Gaza, 45 children killed per day. Just think about that. There's an acronym, a label we had to give children in the emergency room, which was WCNSF, and that stands for Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. So we frequently ran out of equipment in theatres. There was often no fuel. When there's no fuel in the hospital, there's no power for anything. That means ventilators, which are keeping people alive, stop working, and people on ventilators die. That means that incubators, which require fuel to keep babies alive, they stop working and the babies in them die because they can't be kept alive. We had days in the operating theatre when we ran out of surgical gloves. We never had any sterile drapes. We had no drugs. We often had no water to scrub up with. And I, with my own eyes, I have seen, in the 4 weeks I spent in Gaza, I've been an eyewitness, as all of us have, to war crimes and genocide. I have seen every healthcare worker I know who's been in Gaza in the last year has seen children, pre-teen children, with gunshot wounds in their head or their chest or their abdomens. That's not accidental collateral damage. That is direct targeting of small children. We have witnessed the direct targeting of hospitals. That's not just bombing them. That is Israeli ground forces going into the hospitals, dismantling every department, destroying every dialysis machine in Shifa Hospital, destroying every laboratory, destroying every scanner, destroying the water supplies, the sewage supplies, to completely disable the healthcare system in Gaza. They've killed over 1,000 healthcare workers. They've abducted and tortured over 300 healthcare workers, including close friends of mine. The Gazans are a beautiful, beautiful people, and they need our help. But they've been failed by our governments. That's you, Keir Starmer and David Lammy. They've been failed by the media. They've been failed by academic, medical institutions who've been silent. And we need to stand up. We need to do what you're all doing here today, listening to what's going on, so we can end this genocide and hold those people, hold those war criminals and those perpetrators of genocide to account. And that's not just Netanyahu and Gallant, that's also the Western politicians who have not stopped this. We must all talk. We must all donate to Medical Aid for Palestine and Gaza Go Bra, the two wonderful charities that are here today. We must march. We must protest. We must boycott Israeli goods. And whether you're individuals, whether you're medical institutions, whether you're universities, whether you're governments, whether you're newspapers, whether you're radio stations, we will all be defined by how we react to events in Gaza. Thank you very much indeed.